Welcome. You are at the CCC.
Where there are no outside issues. My name is Anthony. I'm an addict and an alcoholic, another bozo on the bus, and I care about you.
And I'm LouiLou. My pronouns are he and him. I'm in recovery for crystal meth and alcohol, and I am always in search of balance. Yes, and each week we strive to foster a brave space where we can engage in conversations centered around topics of recovery.
And our intention is to hold and inspire better spaces for more people in recovery by tackling issues sometimes used to separate us.
But before we do that, please like, share, and rate this episode.
And subscribe. And
yes.
ding that bell.
Ding, ding, ding,
Ding,
ding.
ding, ding. And I'm going to wait until the music is done. And now the disclaimer, the thoughts and opinions expressed.
Sorry, that was the long.
Well, you didn't know I was going to.
Go ahead.
The thoughts and opinions expressed on at the CCC are ours alone. We do not represent anyone but ourselves. The information shared here is for general information purposes only. In other words, we're just a couple of friends behind a mic here to entertain you.
Absolutely. I'm sorry I cut you off, but it's like
it's fine.
I was going to say it's. I just heard
fine.
it's fine. It's not fine.
It's fine.
No,
you're rude. You're self-centered. You're selfish.
Okay, say something that's not true. No, I was thinking it was the extended version of the opening. Because it doesn't seem like it's like an hour later we're like,
I know.
Oh yeah, okay, great.
And then the show's over. Yeah.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good. This has been a busy week. The pageant was just this past weekend.
Exactly. If you're wondering, it was the Castro Country Club pageant. And I'm not going to say it, but I was a former winner.
You weren't going to say, but you just did. It was out of control. How many people were in that theater space?
Billy said they sold 275 tickets, so they oversold. It was pretty amazing.
275. I mean, there was just we were at standing room only at some point.
Exactly.
It was there was a lot of people there, and
energy was good, and
and what an amazing outcome.
The outcome was amazing. It was like I didn't even think about the possibility of a tie.
It felt divinely inspired, honestly.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
We had a tie, and these names might not mean anything to you, but if they do, Seone Gray and Ophelia Knight are our current reigning Miss Castro Country Club.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's so very, very exciting.
Absolutely. Doesn't it seem like it's been a really long time since last week?
Yeah, I mean, it was that intense.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I went to see Company last night again. It's leaving soon, and I was like, take yourself out on a date. Took myself on a date, and then I finger banged me in the bathroom.
And you didn't wipe; you just walked around with a dirty finger the whole time.
I see people doing. I'm all hi. I'm
just giving people typhoid.
Typhoid. Okay, whatever. Great.
Typhoid Mary.
I think we have someone with us.
We do have someone with us. Before you say anything, I wanted to introduce you, if that's okay. So we have David on today. David is a celebrated author and motivational speaker. He's known for his memoir, Every Grain of Sand. And his writing, he talks about personal journey of transformation and redemption. He talks about inspiring accounts of overcoming addiction, trauma, and adversity. And one of the things that I really love that I came across was one reviewer of his memoir described David as, are you ready? A true original, a unique talent who combines open-heartedness with erotic wisdom and a tender appreciation of the wounded, of the lonely, of all that's human, and the most and least approachable in us. Isn't that beautiful?
I want you to introduce me now.
So beyond his writing, David is dedicated to advocate for mental health and addiction recovery. And so we are so very happy to have you on today.
Absolutely. That's when you do the applause, Stephen.
That's when you do the applause. Asleep at the wheel.
No, we have to say that Stephen is amazing because he's not feeling out.
Yeah, he has a cold. Showed up today with a cold. Is wearing a mask and is still here. So we really appreciate it. But
we love you.
But David, welcome on.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
We're very happy to have you on.
And that was a really great introduction. That is, I believe that came from Patrick Mulcahy, who is he's a celebrated writer. He's amazing, and I couldn't believe he wrote that for me. So I was just like, yeah,
it's so nice. High praise. Sweet. So how's your week? How are you doing?
My week has been really interesting and beautiful, really fun. I'm in the throes of changing careers right now, and it was really slow starting. And then all of a sudden yesterday, at the moment when I couldn't show up for my new work, they started calling. So it was, I had to say no. And it was interesting, but it's, I have to just keep in mind that the universe has whatever it has in store for me. So
what inspired the shift?
Age.
Okay.
I mean, one of the things you didn't mention in my intro is that, and Lewis knows this, I think a lot of people know this, is that I've been a sex worker almost my entire sobriety.
Oh, okay.
And yes, and even longer, but kind of early on in my sobriety, I kind of grew into my work as a sex worker. And so I just turned 55 in September, and I'm just wanting to do something different, and I want to do something that I'm passionate about. And so I decided to go into intervention and recovery coaching in essence, but actually partnering with other modalities of care. And so I've been doing a lot of certification and a lot of state board exams and studying and things like that to get qualified to do this new work.
That's really cool. Congratulations.
Nice. Yeah,
so you said your birthday's in September. Are you a Virgo?
Yes.
Hey, so are we.
Yes.
I hate that I just said that on air.
I know we're all Virgos.
But
yeah,
we're all
exactly.
Steven, are you a Virgo? What are you, Steven?
Steven's a Taurus.
Oh, really?
Oh.
So my partner's a Taurus, and Virgo and Taurus are very compatible.
We gel well.
So
I've always that's what I've appreciated about you when you signed on, and I was thinking
about Steven.
Yeah, no, well, about David. It's like I'm on that, and why I was thinking, yeah, we should have him because, and all the time that I've known you, it's like, and you've been able to kind of maneuver and do that in a way, and be true to your recovery,
Yes.
and it's a slippery kind of like place to be, because I think I always think to myself, it's like, okay, so, and I joke with my sponsees about, okay, so we've all been acting like adults. I mean, we're all adults, but we haven't been acting like it, and sometimes we're extremely defiant about the things that don't work in our life, the things that maybe can cause us to kind of relapse or to fall short or whatever, and to be honest and to normalize, because I think that's a big part too, to normalize something that is just so natural and beautiful.
What?
Sex.
Oh, okay. I mean, that whole time I wasn't sure what you were talking about.
You know what? I think that you should drink some coffee before, and so you can.
I was like, "What are you talking about?" You could have been talking about sharks for all I know.
Wow.
But you were talking about like his.
This is what in the beginning I was the one, like I was always poking and prodding, and if you go back and watch older episodes, but the student has surpassed the teacher. And now,
interesting.
Well, the reality of it is like I told them I didn't create this. It was already there. I just maybe encourage you to just be true to who you are.
We have company. Can we behave in front of the guests?
I'll try.
So David, so this is really exciting to have you on. So you've actually, I think you've watched every episode this month, which has been centered around like sex and recovery and pride. And I've appreciated a lot of your contributions during those conversations. So I'm wondering if anything has stood out from you in some of our most recent conversations.
Good luck getting me to remember. I just remember last week there was a topic of discussion, and I don't remember what I had written, like this long, ridiculous comment and posted it. I was like expecting you guys to just read it and answer to it, but and I don't remember what it was about. But no, I think here's my takeaway from the last couple of times that I've watched. Is it has cultivated so much curiosity for me, because I feel like you're the newer generation. You're the younger recovery generation who are coming up in this new world with digital media and more information, sex positivity, more tools are available to us nowadays, that we have evolved into this really great space. And to hear you guys, I don't remember who your guest was last week, but he was really great too. We were talking about going into sex clubs, and it was just so like, I got a little bit emotional because for me, it's such a huge win. For me, it's like, I just remember being early in sobriety and being so terrified, and there was so much stigma and there was so much shame, and prep wasn't really out. And there wasn't a lot of, it was just, in my world, at least in my perception, there was a lot of judgment. And it was tough at first. As a matter of fact, it was so tough that I actually hid the fact that I was a sex worker for the first 16 months of my sobriety. I don't know who I was hiding it from, but I know that I didn't officially come out to my sponsor about it, and I was terrified. And then when I finally kicked the doors off of the closet about being a sex worker, I was really defensive about it. I was really like, and I was still learning. In my world, I was still very new in recovery. And that defense mechanism was a survival technique, but it just feels like we don't have to do that anymore. Like, just listening to your guys' last couple of podcasts, I was just like so relieved, that we have this sort of cultivation of curiosity and courage to support one another and to show up for each other, especially around sex, because it's so weird and awkward sometimes. It can be so shame ridden, so
yeah. Can you say more about, you were talking about like not disclosing that you were a sex worker? So I imagine that before you got sober and now that you're sober, you've had to navigate like shame. And so I'm wondering, like, what has that looked like as a sober person in recovery?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I wish I could get you to repeat it.
Yeah. So what I'm asking is like, so what I'm assuming here, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that when you didn't disclose, and not that you even had to disclose that you were a sex worker, right? But it sounds like there was some shame around disclosing that you were a sex worker, right? And so I imagine that in like the span of your life, you've had to navigate shame, right? So shame when you were drinking and using, and then shame as someone in recovery. And so I'm wondering, like, what has that trajectory looked like for you?
There's a slight separation there.
Okay.
The shame of avoiding trying to own being a sex worker is completely different than the guilt I felt for not disclosing to my sponsor and the people that I'm supposed to be accountable to that I was participating in sex work in recovery, especially in early recovery. I was just having this conversation the other day because I had said, I want to try it, right? I totally lied and said I had been doing it for a long time. I was such a liar when I first got in. I got into the rooms. I was such a dope fiend, and I was just I had to make money and I had to do my thing, and I wasn't letting anybody take my bag from me, right? My money, not my. I gave up the dough.
We got it.
So, anyway, so yeah, but as I was trying to think a little bit deeper about this because it was like, at first I was very defensive, right? I was like, I'm going to do this work. It's helping other people. I'm being of service to the guys who couldn't, it was just all this other stuff. And once the walls started coming down and the defenses started coming down, the more sacred aspects of the work I was doing started showing up, especially in the people that I would see. One of the very big turning points in my work as a sex worker was that I showed up for a man, and I didn't know that he was an amputee and that he was a war veteran, and he had PTSD, and he had all this shame and despair around it. And I was just in this room in the Tenderloin thinking, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do. And I knew in my heart that he had experienced rejection deeply and that he was prepared to be rejected again. And I was like, not going to let that happen. I was so codependent. I was like, not going to let, like the clothes came off. I hopped into the situation and we did what we did. And I just remember walking out onto Gary Street. It was on Gary and Leavenworth or something, and sitting down on the curb. And I had don't judge me, I had a flip phone from Metro PCS, new in recovery.
We all did.
And I flipped my phone open and I called the guy I was dating at the time, and I just burst into tears. And the first things that came out of my mouth was, I think I know what I'm supposed to be doing.
Wow.
I think I know what I'm supposed to be doing, because that interaction with this man who had expected rejection and learned that he was acceptable felt honored and felt seen and heard and touchable was, for me, it was revolutionary. For me, it was incredible. I was just like, I was like, this is a beautiful experience. I want more of this. As any good addict, I want more. Right. So, so I just jumped in and I was just like, this is what it's about for me. It really is about showing up and crossing that threshold and finding a way to be useful in this room. And it was what I was learning at Fireside Chat, at the Castro Country Club. It was what I was learning. Go pick up chairs, go help out, go introduce yourself to, it was the same
principles in all your affairs.
It was the same principles. It was showing up and serving, but in a way that was, it was wild, and it just grew from there. I talk a lot, so shut me down.
No, it's okay. We have a couple comments coming in. First comment, Brandon writes, one of David's comments from last week, at first, when I would see other sober friends at sex venues, I would be a little apprehensive and weird, but got over it. Mostly love seeing other sober people nowadays, rarely interact with friends in anon-like situations. I know it's important to model sexual freedom, especially for others that feel super uncomfortable and awkward. One thing I remember is sex is awkward and uncomfortable at times, especially initially. Thank you for that, Brandon, and thank you, David, for that. And there was another comment, wasn't there? No, Stephen? Okay.
Well, I think on that, it's super important to note that, like, and I usually try to be thoughtful, because I realized that somebody was patient with me, so I get to be patient, because, I stopped going to the kink meeting on Fridays, and maybe I judged too quickly and too harshly, because it felt as though, when you have people who are like are really kind of comfortable with their sexuality or whatever, and they forget that people are apprehensive, and like you said, and sex can be awkward, that they need to kind of like, meet the person where they are. But I think that it is important, especially for us, especially if crystal meth is something we've been doing, to at least attempt. Do you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. David, I want to get your opinion on something.
Yes.
So one of the things that I've noticed a lot in the rooms, and so has Lewis, is that a lot of people, when they're new, especially like in queer spaces, a lot of times when people are new, you'll find, and my partner works in a rehab and he's noticed this too, that when people come into recovery spaces, they immediately, not immediately, some people start identifying like people that they're sexually attracted to, and then they start to kind of like pursue those sexual relationships, right? And so I want to let's put that in the parking lot for a second. So on one end, like, of course, sexuality can be healthy and it can be generative, and it could also be used dissociatively, and it could also be used in a way that's like escapist, right? So I'm wondering, like, when you think about like the healing behind sexuality, I imagine that there's also like a sense of responsibility there. Anyway, I'm curious what you think about like sex and responsibility and recovery and like people who are new.
Yeah, I think that's a really important topic. I think it's a really deeper conversation to have, because I have a lot of opinions about it. I think context is also important. Absolutely. And the awareness of a sexual template is really important, and what triggers, what has historically caused relapse, what is this person, as an individual basis. There are some treatment centers right now in Los Angeles that are really leaps and bounds above and getting in front of this, what you're talking about. And I love it. But I think in general, my opinion is somewhat controversial, but at the same time, I believe it's a healthy alternative, rather than hiding and shaming and being judgmental and saying, you can't do this, you can't do that, and don't have sex for a year, or all that other stuff. In treatment and early sobriety, and we start attaching ourselves to people and fixing on the sex we want to have with the guy that we have this hot crush on for a minute. I don't know how medicinal that is. And I don't know how useful that is. I think we've all done something of that nature. We've all crossed into those murky waters. And I think I had this sponsor one time say to me, I hope you sponsor all the hottest guys in the room. I don't know what that mark is. Did I do some kind of movement?
It's some movement. That's what came up. Yeah. If we do like I don't know if we can do it. Only he.
That was weird. But you know, he said, I hope you sponsor all the hottest guys in the room. And what he meant by that was to learn boundaries, to learn how to really be present with people who you're attracted to.
David, I
saying
love
that.
Yeah,
I
go
will
ahead,
just finish with this.
Yeah.
Saying that, I have always encouraged my sponsees to, and the men I've worked with, to engage in sexual activity in a healthy way. I've always encouraged it. And even with 7 days, if you go to the bathhouse, if you're going to hook up, if you're going to use that app, do it. Call me, call somebody, do it in a way that you feel comfortable doing it.
Absolutely.
If you're triggered, talk about it.
Yeah.
It doesn't always work. It's not always healthy.
That's so important. I'm always with my sponsees now. I will never tell someone to not. I'm not. That's not my responsibility. Is not to tell you not to do it.
Yeah.
But I always say, like it says on 69, it's like we don't want to be the arbiter of it, or 68, 69. We don't be the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct, but somebody better be, and hopefully it's you. And so checking your motives. What's going on? Why are you doing this? And be okay with that.
And let me just say this as well, because I think this is important. People would come to me for sponsorship or for advice and help because they knew I was a sex worker. They knew I was sex positive. They struggled with sex. They struggled with chemsex. And so the topic of conversation was often, how are we going to navigate this? Because I'm not giving it up. It's the one thing that's keeping me alive, basically. It's the only thing that, isn't a drug right now that I can use. And one of the, I don't know, I guess for years I have plenty of success and plenty of relapses behind it. So I'm not going to say it's the answer, but, it's been to explore. And I've said, explore and practice, because sex without crystal meth, sex without drugs is not going to be intense.
No.
Intimacy is actually going to show up. And because the brain has, I love David Fawcett says this in his book, that what meth does is it swaps out intimacy for intensity. And the brain starts thinking that intensity is intimacy. And so when we get into recovery and we don't have the meth and we go looking for that intimacy, the brain is looking for the intensity and it's not showing up. And we're like, oh, this doesn't work for me. And that may or may not be true, but that's why I say practice. And so it's really important for people to really, especially queer men who are, we are sexual beings. And so, but there is something to be said about, giving it a minute, take a second.
Yeah. I was having this conversation with my partner yesterday about how, he and you share a lot of the same opinions around this, at least the ones that I just heard you say. And he was saying, like, we were talking about our own sex life, and we were talking about like what does sexual fluidity look like, and what does like a sex without fear look like, and what does like sex without hangups look like, and what does sex look like when it doesn't have to feel so fraught with like all the like judgment and decisions. Like, what does sex look like then?
I just love that you guys have these intellectual conversations about sex.
I absolutely want to talk about this, so don't you dare interrupt him. Keep going. This is so important, please.
Yeah, so we were talking about that, like we were like, we're gay men, he and I, we're in a monogamous relationship, but we've talked about like, what would it look like if we like, if we started to like reconceptualize like the structure of a relationship. And it opened up this conversation about like, oh, well, what would it look like, like to face jealousy, or to like all the things that are so wrapped up in sex and sexuality. Right. So you had some thoughts?
I do. Oh boy, do I have thoughts. Oh God, you're gonna regret you invited me to this podcast. This is so beautiful, and it's so important because I want to repeat what I heard you say, because I think it's really it's the thing that is my thing right now. It's my jam, and it's when we say, what does sex look like without the awkwardness or the insecurity? What does sex look like without the jealousy? What does our relationship look like if we are not monogamous? And so what I hear when I hear that terminology, and it doesn't need to, I don't need to be rigid about it. We don't need to be rigid about the conversation. But when we frame things in that way, we're saying, I want to remove jealousy. I want to remove awkwardness. I want to remove insecurity. I want to remove my idea of not enoughness from the sex. And I am really, I'm here to give you some bad news and some really good news is we don't have to remove it. We can have, I mean, at least in my opinion, my opinion, I'm so willing to be incorrect about this, is that insecurity, inadequacy, not enoughness, jealousy, our egos, our bruising, our wounds belong in the room with the sex. They belong to us. They are sacred. That's where all of the empowering information is. If everything was great and perfect all the time, the growth is not there to manifest that intensity and the intimacy of that intensity. And I'm not a doctor, but I've been doing this a really long time. And I know that, you know, I've done a lot of work. I've done a lot of steps. I've done a lot of therapy, a lot of trauma work, and the inadequacy, the thoughts of not enoughness, the idea that can I curse on this show or not?
You can say
that
whatever.
My cock is not big enough, that I'm not good enough, that I'm too skinny or too fat or too whatever is all there. It's all running game in my head. And my job in the rooms that I walk into is to right size all of that conversation and make the table bigger, make the room bigger, be more expansive, invite it all in, because when our relationship to these ideas in our head are, I got to get rid of this in order for me to get to this place of freedom, it's nearly impossible. You may get reprieve, you may get a break from it, but it's going to come back. And then you're going to be like, I did all that work. And here I am again, thinking my cock's not big enough, you know, and I can't walk into the sex hub, or I can't ask my partner. Here's the big one for you, Anthony, that is going to come up, right? Like, we get into this groove with our partner, and then we don't want to ask for something because we are afraid of what our partner might respond to. This is a very common thing that happens. So I'm just saying, like, when we seek freedom and liberation in our sexual spaces, especially intimate sexual spaces with a one-on-one, at the bathhouse, in dating, whatever it is our journey of trying to be rid of all of the things we don't like that keep us from crossing the threshold many, many times. I don't know how much of that made sense to you, but it is my jam.
It made a ton of sense. Yeah. The thing is that I feel very fortunate in that my partner and I, one rule that we have is no taboos, right? So there are no taboos. That is like every question, you know, like every question, every need is like valid. And I feel like very fortunate in that, you know, I can ask for things that might be scary, you know?
Yeah.
And one of the things, and I feel like you guys, maybe you guys should connect sometime. One of the things that he says he says exactly what you say, which is like, yeah, all of that stuff is sometimes like, you can't get rid of the jealousy or all that other stuff. The one thing that we can focus on is re-engaging and reconnecting. And like, that is where we put like our attention and our strength.
Keeping all of that in. Also, while I was listening to you, it seems to be important for my practice of humility.
Yeah.
Because
say more. What do you mean?
Well, because if I'm not thinking of those things, if I think that, you know, obviously I'm never going to be perfect, but this idea that I got it, I may come in and not be concerned about the other person. I mean, because of some of my feelings of inadequacy or whatever, I may overcompensate or try to add or change or whatever, and it has to. And I also think that this is a part of our process of growth. And the more that I experience this, and the more that I realize, you know, it's okay. Also, when you find out that the person that you're with, like last night, I was with this guy, and we were able to have amazing conversations. Like, for me, it's like, I always share, I'm somewhere in between a relationship and, well, I don't even think I'm there, but I'm somewhere in between, like out behind a tree out back and a person that I see regularly. And we had such an amazing time because it was, I didn't let go of any of that. I just kind of showed up, flaws and all, and to have another person kind of connect with you and you believe what's there on the surface. Do you know what I'm getting at?
I do.
Yeah.
I do know what you're saying. David, were you going to say something?
I was just listening. I was enjoying the one thing I really love about this particular podcast is it is so evolved, and it is, there's, I just come from a different place where there's a lot of like opinions that are rigid and narrow-minded sometimes, and I just am so relieved that this is not one of those spaces.
I
need to get out more.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is that for the longest time, and I feel like through my conversations with Lewis and maybe living in San Francisco, like, I come from Pennsylvania, which is and Brian and I talked about this during the last episode, is that like, I come from a place that's like super rigid, right? Where like anything outside of like vanilla sex, even within a gay relationship, is like kind of like frowned upon, or people have like really intense opinions about it. So it wasn't until like I moved here and I saw things like modeled, you know what I mean? Like, it was out here that I like was the first time I met people that were like, yeah, bitch, I slept with 15 people yesterday, and like, who gives a fuck? Like, it was the first time I came across people who were like really owning their sexuality. And it was also the first time that I came across people who were like, you know what, that's not my thing, but I'm not going to judge you because you're doing that thing.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like those two things coexisting.
Yeah.
As people in recovery, and I've shared about this before, is like I'm in SLA, so Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous. So I wonder how you, like, just given like your experiences, like how do you like conceptualize, or do you think about like sexual addiction when it comes to like sexual freedom and sex positivity?
Yeah. Because I'm not a sex addict, I don't want to speak to it in the frame that I think I know what I'm talking about, because I don't. And so my opinion doesn't have the value that somebody who has experience. I've done Sex Compulsive Anonymous before. I've dipped into a couple of the Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous meetings a few times. And I remember the thing about the circles. And I just love that concept about when we start getting outside. I love the tools. I'm just such a diehard street meth addict, IV drug user, homeless, toothless guy, that it's like, if I'm not selling my mom's jewelry and I'm not robbing a bank, is it addiction? And I know for other people, it is. People have lost their jobs behind sex. People have stopped, living their life behind sex. So I know there's a modality or a space that experience happens. I don't have experience in it, and I don't want to have a judgment about it.
Yeah,
it doesn't serve anyone for me to say something I think I know, but that for me, in the world I live in, that's how it is.
I feel I can connect with you on that, because I feel like I've had this interpersonal kind of conversation about that, because I understand how what my behavior can almost look like addiction. But I realized that and I came to terms with the fact that the obsession, the compulsiveness around it was related to my active addiction. And there are times when I slip into and I'm using it to check out, but I'm able to acknowledge it and step away from it. And I think that's a difference, because if I were in a situation, like I said, where I was consumed and I wasn't able to, but it's like knowing that I'm able to kind of stop, think about it, or even have the willingness, because sometimes you're like, I don't care. No, but I do care. And there are times when I have to fast. I have to have a sexual fast, because I've been acting up, and I always go back to it.
I just have had so many experiences where I've had, week-long sexcapades. Like, I go to this thing in Fort Lauderdale. It's called Pig Week, actually.
Nice.
And it's like 9 days long of sex. I'm like, day 3, I'm like, I gotta go home. I'm like, it's like, no, it is too much. But I could see myself really fixated in that space. Like, really, if my body could hold out, I would probably just, ass up, whatever, or go to the ass up room, whatever it is. There's all kinds of play spaces I would enter into. It's fun, but it's not something I pursue. It's not something that I mean, I love, my world is involved with a lot of sex positive spaces, especially sober sex positive spaces, parties and things like that. So I do attend a lot of those things, but I don't know. Tell us, Anthony, what is your experience like with sex addiction? Is it
Like
sex and love addiction?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in a SLA. I think I think I'm with you in that. Like, I think it's, well, like, speaking from experience, I think that like I'm an addict at my core, right? So whether it's sex or food or spending or like you name it, right? Like I can be addicted to just about anything. And the only way I know how to answer this for myself is like I'm thinking about the behaviors that motivated me to go to SLA, right? And some of it wasn't just sex, some of it was like in relationships. Like I noticed myself like jumping from relationship to relationship because I would get a high from like the novelty of romantic relationships. And then like similarly, I noticed that like I would use sex to check out and that it was starting to like interfere with my life. And so and and I think the kind of the other part of that's related to all of that is actually it was causing me a great deal of emotional pain. And it was at the point where like my behaviors were causing emotional pain where I wasn't so much, I got to a point where I'm like, you know what, like never mind what the fuck I'm doing. I just don't want to feel this way anymore. And so I feel very fortunate in that, like, SLA exists and I was able to find like that peace of mind in SLA. And like, I feel like my sex and love life has been right-sized, but that's something that I try to kind of, that's like a space that I hold for myself. And like, one of the things that I have to be really careful of is I have to not like pathologize other people's sexual behavior, right? Like, the other night I found out that like this group of guys that I know that they had an orgy. And my first thought was like, I wanted to pathologize it. I'm like, they have no business doing this thing. Like, I won't disclose much more than that.
You say too much and I'll be like,
well, if I say too much, then like you can figure out who the people are.
Right.
I know the whores in our group. I love it.
But the point is that I have to be very careful not to put my shit onto other people. It's like
I heard you say that last week too, and I liked that.
And it's like, and one of the things that I have to own is that like I am still working through stuff. You know what I mean? Like I'll be 40 in September, and I'm still working through like old ideas and behaviors and like and so that's kind of how I think about sex addiction, which is like
that's what's so good about our relationship. And I think we are, what you were just saying, it's like we on a lot of things we're on opposite ends of the spectrum, but I'm absolutely respect and understand. It's like I'm all, and the fact that I feel like with the way that I think about sex and sexuality and all that good stuff, when I got to, and I know not everybody gets there, but when I got to a place where I'm going to talk about it, and this is how I sort through bullshit. Like if you are someone who can't appreciate what I'm saying, or if I don't feel like I can talk, and don't get me wrong, I'm not the person, I'm not going to be talking about all the time, but most of the time. But usually it's like, it's how I decided, like who I'm going to spend my time around. It's like, because this is who I am. It's like, I'm going to give you me, all of me, and I'm going to express myself. That's the gift of recovery, that we have more options of people who are like, okay with you being open.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, we have a comment.
We do.
Rose writes, "Hey guys, just a note that these issues also arise in lesbian relationships and encounters. I've been lucky enough to have evolved sexually to feel very comfortable with discussing the issues with whomever I'm with, but it like I said is evident in a lesbian relationship." Saying, Rose, I love that you're bringing this up.
Exactly.
And this is actually something we've been talking about a lot. So just some behind the scenes stuff is that we are exploring having a femme-bodied person to join in on these conversations, specifically lesbian, because
it's absolutely easy to forget about parts of the conversation, because like right now all I'm thinking about is me as a Black gay man.
Right.
I'm an alcoholic. I'm just focused in on me.
Yeah.
Rose should be a guest on the show.
Absolutely, Rose.
Yes, come on home.
Sorry, I just got a text message and I'm like, bitch, I haven't talked to you. And it's speaking of, it's a guy I hooked up with when I was in the Dominican Republic, which was over 2 years ago. And he just sent me a selfie. And I'm like, what? I haven't, like, what are you doing?
Your magic work. It's still working,
like, huh? What? Anyway,
he just had a moment.
Because I was like, what are you doing? Okay.
Giggle,
sorry.
giggle, giggle.
But Rose, thank you for bringing that up.
I know, Rose.
That like, you're 100. That's 100%.
You make us do better.
Yeah, 100%
yes.
True. But yeah, and so having your comment contribute to the conversation in a really meaningful way. So we have, I think, 9 minutes left or 5 minutes left. And so I don't want to. 4 minutes left. Okay.
4 minutes.
4 minutes. Oh, wow.
Minutes.
We're going to do our little thing, and then we're going to go to our podcast.
Yeah. So we're going to, we'll close out the on-air stuff. And then for folks who are interested in the rest of this conversation, you can tune into.
We love you too.
We love you too, Rose. Thank you for tuning in. For folks who are interested in hearing the rest of this conversation, you can find it wherever you listen to podcasts and our podcast exclusive content.
Yeah, when Brandon starts uploading these episodes.
Oh, not you calling people out on it. My God. All right, Stephen, where are those notes?
The Castro Country Club is a safe and sober community center for all people and a refuge for the LGBTQ recovery community.
We provide programs and services that help people change their lives by supporting personal growth.
Our vision is to reduce the suffering of addiction by connecting people to community, opportunity, and support.
You can find more information, including all the ways to contact us, at www.castrocountryclub.org/podcast.
Tune in every Wednesday at 8 p.m.-ish Pacific Standard Time when we go live in our Castro Country Club Facebook and YouTube channels.
Find us wherever you listen to podcasts.